Um, this is a tutorial for Twinmotion using custom textures and custom plants. So I've got this scene in Twinmotion that I brought in a SketchUp model, and all of the objects you see are the basic Twinmotion objects. I got some people, some trees, some plants, some Twinmotion materials, Twinmotion grass. Everything looks pretty good, but there's a couple things that I couldn't find in the native Twinmotion objects or materials. So this material right here on the top of this band up here, their client requested to be a custom material, and also the material below the band, another custom material that I couldn't find in Twinmotion, as well as two different types of plants that I couldn't find in the basic objects of Twinmotion. So I'm going to show you how to do both. So I'm going to minimize Twinmotion and open up my SketchUp model. So here's the SketchUp model. I'm going to work on the textures first. So I'm going to go to my materials tab and use the eyedropper and eyedropper this material here. Go to edit and then say use texture image, and I'm going to find the custom texture that I was requested to use. Put that on there. Now the scale, you can adjust the scale based on how many inches you want each of the bricks to be. I already have my scale set just for to make it faster. I know how many feet and inches this texture should be to make it show up properly. But you'll have to count how many bricks you want, how many millimeters or how many inches each brick should be. Do that on your own. Uh, I'm gonna have to just double click on this, right click on the texture and say texture position and just move it down just a little bit because it looks like it's a little bit too high. So that looks good right there. And then I'll use the eyedropper over here to eyedropper that same texture over here. So now then I'm just going to right click on the texture position and just move it over just so it lines up. Those lines line up with the model. Um, that looks good. So now let's use the eyedropper in the materials window to get this material and load the second custom texture right here. Go to edit, click on use texture image, and then click on the image you want. And that looks good. That looks like the right scale and everything. I might want to make it a little bit brighter and maybe increase the saturation a little bit. I think that looks good. And make this one a little bit brighter. That looks good the way it is now. Okay, so I've got my custom textures loaded into SketchUp in the SketchUp model, so I'm going to save it and minimize it. I'll go back into the Twinmotion and then go to my import tab, and then where the model is, I'm going to click refresh, and it should bring in those custom textures now. There, it worked. I can see the custom textures on the model, and one thing you'll notice is that if you go into the file where this Twinmotion file is saved, it created a new folder called the same name as the file, but with extracted textures. And that's very important that you keep wherever you send this model. Now you have to send also this folder with the extracted textures. So if I double click in there and I see my thumbnails, so it created these textures, even though I have them somewhere else on my hard drive. But now this is associated with this. So you don't want to lose that connection. Wherever you copy that file, keep this folder with it. Now I want to dress the textures up a little bit because they look kind of flat and kind of washed out. So I'm gonna go click on the eyedropper tool and eyedropper this material, and I can increase the reflection. And you see it doesn't really do that much for me. It doesn't look very bumpy like it should. Um, Now the reason why is because it needs a normal map. And so the textures that are natively in Twinmotion, they have normal maps. So if I click on this one, this mulch, you can see that it has this bumpiness to it. And that's because if I go into the settings of that material, I can see there's a bump map and then click on more underneath bump. And there's an image that's preloaded into here, which is this wood chips O2 underscore normal. So that's automatically in Twinmotion. So what I need to do is I need to create normal maps for my custom textures. So if you're working on a project with me, I will send you the normal maps to load. But if you're doing it yourself, you have to find your textures here and create normal maps for them. And how I found the best way to do that, the easiest way is there's this software called Shader Map. So if you download Shader Map, you open up the software and you click on this plus button. So you're going to load an image, find your texture, and double click on it. So it will load it into the simulation program in Shader Map, and um, it will create all these other maps for it to make it look really nice in 3D automatically, like the way it's supposed to. So I'll go back to find like a square there. So you can see it might be a little bit too bumpy, um, but you can adjust the amount of bump once you're in Twinmotion. So there's all these other maps which are nice, but they take a little bit too long to load all of them. So I'm just gonna focus on the normal map, this kind of bluish image that it creates, and that bends the light in 3D in real time to make it look like it's bumpy. So I click on that normal map, and then I click this little save button next to it, and I'm going to change it from PNG to JPEG, and then just click save, that little save button there, and that's done. So that file is created next to here automatically for the normal map. I'm going to do the same thing for the other one. So open up Shader Map software and load in the texture, and it will automatically create a nice maps for 3D. It's this program is amazing. It works so fast, and the intelligence of it, the program is very good. And I could see in this case, it looks like the these grout lines are sticking out, but I want them to go in, so I might want to try to reverse the direction. I'll see if that looks better or not, but I'll click on this, and then down here in the settings, I can click invert. So that looks a lot better. So depending on the color of the grout lines, if the grout lines are dark, it should work fine because it's gonna make the dark look like it's going in and the light parts of the material looks like it's sticking out. But if it's not, if it's light lines with a dark brick, you're probably going to want to click invert on your normal map. And then you can save it. Click save it. Change it to JPEG. Save it. So now I've got both normal maps. Now the only thing about these is they're very large. It doesn't compress them very much, so it each one is about 25 megabytes, and I like to keep my files around 3 megabytes, more or less, you know. Like this one is almost 5. That's a little bit, I just don't like to have them too big because The more you let your file sizes get big and then you're trading your files back and forth, it just takes a lot longer and gets out of control. So just gonna bring these normal maps into Photoshop and just compress them down using just saving them again as a JPEG. Um, but first, what I want to make sure I get across, this is very important. So you have to create a separate folder for these normal maps because what happens is, so I'm going to create a new folder and just drop these inside there. If you don't do that and you just leave them in here, the next time you load your SketchUp model and you refresh it, you make a change in SketchUp, you refresh it, it's going to redo this folder and it's going to delete every all the files inside here and then replace them with the new textures from SketchUp. But it won't delete this because it's a different folder. It doesn't recognize it, so it's going to just be in stealth mode. So make sure you put your normal maps in a new folder inside here. So they're still in the main folder, but they're separate. That's going to protect them from getting deleted later on. So I'm just going to bring them into Photoshop, save them out again, compress them a little bit so the file size isn't so huge. So I'm not concerned. Most textures that you zoom um, in in architectural visualizations, you're not getting really close, like 2 inches away from them or 100 millimeters away from the texture. So you don't need a huge level of detail. Like, you're usually standing back like 20 feet or 12 feet back in the distance. So you don't need to fill up your hard drive with huge files. So I'm going to try to save these. I will save it as a Photoshop file first, just so if I mess it up, I can redo it and I won't keep compressing it over and over again, just as a backup. Then I'll save it as a JPEG and see if I save it as 9 compression, let's see how much megabytes that is. So that's still 16 megabytes. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna compress it more. I'm gonna save it as a JPEG, but compress it down to a level of 5. See what that is now. So that's 6 megabytes. That's still too high for me. So I'm gonna reduce the size. So I'm gonna go to image size. I'm gonna reduce this down to a lower size. Just scale it down to like 75% of what it was. 'Cause I really want to get that file size down a little bit. Let's see what the file size is now. See, it's 4 megabytes. That's fine. I'll go with that. So I'll do the same thing with this. So I'm gonna go to image size, and then reduce the file size. The resolution of the pixels about 75%. Save as a JPEG. Well, first I'll save it as a. Before I do that, I'm just gonna save it as a Photoshop file, just as a backup until the project is done and I know I didn't screw anything up. Now I'll adjust the image size, save it as a JPEG, and compress it to 5. And then, so now they're both about 4 megabytes, which is okay for now. I'll go with that. So now when I go back into my Twinmotion file and I use the eyedropper selected on my material, go into settings, and then under bump, click on more, and then where it says generic, click on it and click open. And then you can replace it with the ones we just made. So that's going to be this file right there. So now, it might be hard to see from this angle, but it's created a bumpiness on it. So if I increase the reflection, it's not super visible because of the lighting in the scene. It's kind of bright sunlight, but it did um, it did load our bumpiness in there, and it might be a little more noticeable on this one, I'm not sure, but it's very important to get that bump map in there, that normal, well, not the bump map, the normal map. It used to be bump map when in the days where people used uh, ray tracing, um, photorealistic rendering engines, but now that most people are using real-time engines like Twinmotion, Unreal Engine, and many other. Even V-Ray is going to a real-time engine now because it's just so much faster and you can get the quality almost exactly to look as good. So I'm gonna click eyedropper on this one, go to settings, bump, more, load in, click on the normal map, open, and load in the normal map that we made. Oh, see, you can see a huge difference with this one. This one, the texture is already just the image itself looks bumpy, so you don't notice it as much, but this image looks very flat without the bump map. See, if I turn down um if I go to settings and I turn down the bump level, you can see it's like night and day difference. Might not want it to be 100%. I might want it to be like 65%. And that looks much better. You can just see night and day. I go to the reflection. I can turn up the reflection a little bit, and now it's much more realistic looking on our building. Okay, so that's how you do custom textures. So let's go ahead and save, do a file incremental save. Now I'm going to show you how to do some custom plants. And when I say custom, I don't mean like we're going to model them in SketchUp and bring them in, which you can do that. It just takes a long time, like a couple, 2 or 3 hours per plant. But Epic Games, who owns Twinmotion, bought Quixel Megascans. So there's hundreds of different trees and are not necessarily trees, but hundreds of different plants, furniture, kind of like logs and rocks and different things that are you might find laying around in nature. Now, I don't suggest using these unless you have to. The reason is that these are Quixel Megascans are scanned image 3D files from real life objects, and the file sizes are huge. They can be several hundred megabytes per object. So if you use 10 or 20 objects from Quixel Megastands in your scene and you just get kind of loose with it, loosey goosey, and just throwing in all things to make it look more realistic, your file size of your Twinmotion file could get many, many, many gigabytes large and it could get out of control. And when you try to send it to other members of your team, it could be a nightmare. So what I suggest is doing as much as you possibly can with the basic objects in Twinmotion, just in trees, plants, objects, materials, because those are extremely optimized for low file size, but they still look just as good, in my opinion, as the Quixel Megascans. But there's more options. So you might get to the end like I did, and I have 2 plants that I couldn't find in the basic plants in Twinmotion. So we're gonna make them out of find them in the Quixel Megascans or combine a couple different ones together to make those. So if I go to my folder, um, I have these plants are requested by the clients. So I have this grass plant and then this flowering plant right here. And then I have a plan here that shows where they should go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the SketchUp model and I'm going to drag in the plan file into the SketchUp model. Oops, didn't come in all the way. I have to give it a second. Okay, there. and uh, going to turn on X-ray mode and then go to my top view and then scale it so that it lines up with the correct size of the model. So I can see where my building's supposed to line up here. It needs to be a little bit bigger. I'm not gonna be 100% perfect because it's just showing where the plants should go. It just has to be pretty close. So now that I got it lined up, I'm gonna move it up in the air, turn off X-ray mode on our styles tab, right click on it and explode. So when I right click on the image, explode, it turns into a texture. Now I can go to my materials tab, use the eyedropper, and eyedropper this texture down onto here. And then I can go ahead and delete that. So now it's going to bring in this texture so I know where the plants should go. So I'm going to save it and then go into Twinmotion and import tab, refresh model. And you can see all these objects are Twinmotion objects, and then it brings in the SketchUp model again. So I can see I have these plants here, which may need to get a little bit bigger. I'm not concerned about them being 100% perfectly accurate. Uh, just an approximation. So this one should be the grass, and then the starburst one should be the flowering plant over here. So let's go ahead and since I couldn't find those plants in the regular vegetation objects, which I should always try it first, I'm going to go into Quixel Megascans, go into 3D plants, and then go into grass and just kind of look for um, trying to remember if I saw some in here that worked good. Looks like I have to sign in. Okay. So again, like in the other tutorial, if there's a download link button right here, that means that that file is not on my hard drive yet. So if I want to use that object, I have to click this download link. And they do that because so that you don't have to fill up your entire hard drive with tons of objects and plants and things that things that you haven't used, you may not ever use them. So they don't want to fill up your hard drive right away. They'll let you pick the ones you want to download. So let's see. I think since these ones are already downloaded, I probably already experimented with them. Yeah, I think. uh, Let me try this one. See what this. So I downloaded it by clicking that link. Then I click on it, and I have to click this plus variations button. So that will load all these different objects, and then I can start playing with the different styles. This one, I may use this and just use it, uh, just combine them, oh, a few different kinds together. I think this is the one that I might have gone with. I don't remember which variation. I think maybe that variation is the one I like the best. Yeah, number 5. So I can click on this. And the thing with this, it looks kind of thin, so I may double it up. I may use two in the same spot, and that will just make it thicker. But I want to rotate one of them so it doesn't line up perfectly. And I may make those a little bit bigger, and then also adjust the color a little bit to be a little bit more green, a little bit darker. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Um, I'm probably gonna make it a little bit bigger still, and then move it down a little bit. That. And I can also mix other things with it. So I may go back into my regular vegetation library, go into bushes, and then add some of this other grass. There's nothing wrong with doing that because I want to add a few of these kind of wheat looking things here. This reed grass. And I'm also going to change the tint a little bit because I want these to stick up a little bit in the middle. So I'm basically creating my own plant out of multiple different plants. And then when I go into here, I can select all of them, shift select all, right click, make new container, and just call that uh, maiden grass. That's the name of the one I'm trying to make. Then I can right click on that and say add to user library. Go to my library, user library, and then I'll put that into the proper bucket. So plant, I'll put that in grass. Okay. Oh, but the one thing that I forgot to do is move my pivot point. So right now it's too low. So I'm going to move it up so the pivot point's in the right spot and select all the objects inside the main container, move all of those down. Now my pivot point is in the correct spot. So I'm gonna have to delete this and resave it, add to user library. So now I can go ahead and just one click get all of these grasses planted really fast. So far I've only used one Quixel Megascan object in my scene, and I try to limit it to one or two just because the file sizes are so big. I mean, if you have to use more, that's fine, but if you can avoid it, I would just just the file sizes get out of control. We use too many. Okay, so our grass object is done. Let me put those in the proper spot. So I'm gonna make a new folder for this, and then move that folder into the plants folder. And then let's go ahead and save this. Incremental save. And then we have one more plant to make, and then we're done. So I'm trying to make this plant right here. So I'm gonna go into my Quixel Megascans, 3D plants, and start looking maybe flowering plant. I think as I was looking through these earlier, um, actually, I think this is the plant I might have liked better for this one. I think it was actually. Now that I see it, even though it's in a different spot, I think I like that one better than the one I made. I may just do the same thing and double it up. It's okay to change your mind. Nothing wrong with that. If I see something I think looks better, I'm definitely going to change it. Why not? I think it looks better, so I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to delete these other grasses. I'll still leave it in my user library, but I like this one better. So I'm going to replace it. Just works a little bit better. Add that to my user library. Oops. Put that in grass. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna increase the size of these a little bit, like that. Probably move them down just a little bit, like that. Okay, now let's move on. Let's save these into a folder, then drag that into the plants folder, and then once again save. Then we can move on. Now that I redid that plan, but hey, if you have an opportunity to make something better than what's already done, always take it. There's no reason to. Okay, so Back to looking for my 3D plants, flowering plants. See if I can find the one I was looking at earlier. It's not in here. I'm not sure. Maybe, oh, here's a flowering plant. Yeah, this is a flower. It's in flower head. I don't know. I don't understand these names, but the one I was looking at is right here. So the rosehip bush was the one that I thought would give me a good base to get started with. It's taking a little bit to load. Okay. Oh, that's not the right. I think it's a smaller one here because that one's too tall. I mean, I could just lower it down. Trying to think what's better. Yeah, I think I'll use this one, but I'll lower it down and just make sure my pivot is lower. So let's start on top of one of these spots. Yeah, that looks good. I'm going to adjust the color, the tint of the leaves, make it a little bit darker, maybe just a little bit darker still, a little bit more. Yeah, like that. If I look at my image that I'm trying to copy, that's a good start, but I think the image has more flowers, so what I can do is it might be a little bit too dark. That's good. Is I can find another flower group, like something in here, and just add more flowers to it. Try to match the same colors. That's just a single flower. I think maybe the color is a little bit off. Maybe this one. Yeah, that one looks good. I'll probably just make it bigger. Actually, this one looks good. Let me add a few of these. Just to make it to give it more flowers. It's not exactly the same. Mm, I'm not happy with the color. I think this color is better. Let me delete those. I think this one has the best color. This is the one I like. So let me add a few of these. And then I want to scale them up. I wouldn't do this normally, but since these plants and these materials are requested specifically by the customer, that's why I'm doing this. As I want to match it as closely as I can to what they want. So that looks pretty good. I'm gonna call it good. Shift click all of these, right click, make a new container, and it's called Azalea. Okay. Right click, add to user library. Go to my library. Oh, actually, I forgot again. Keep forgetting to move the pivot point. Okay, so click on the group, move it up so that the pivot point lines up with the ground. and then select all of the objects inside of it, move that down to the correct height. Now it's correct. If you don't do that, then when you try to put it in out in the world from here, it's going to be too high off the ground. That's a pain in the butt. So right click, add to user library, put this in flowers, and then add these wherever I see that symbol. So in total, I've used 3 of the Quixel Megascans objects. It's more than I want to use, but I'm gonna I'm gonna go with it. It's okay. Okay, so that's done. The last oh let's clean this up. Let's go ahead and save it. Incremental save. And the last thing we need to do is just put back the mulch material in our SketchUp file. So I can go to my materials tab, click on the home button, and then just right click on this texture image and delete that material. Then use my eyedropper and then bring that material back over. So in Twinmotion, that's the mulch material. So save it and go into Twinmotion and then refresh the model and our mulch material should come back. And it did. Okay, so should be good to go. So that's it for this lesson. Um, so to recap, always use as many native Twinmotion objects and textures that you can that look good. And then when you get down to the last few that you can't find, you can use custom textures uh, by loading them into SketchUp. It's a little bit of a hassle. You have to keep that folder with the file, and then you have to make your own normal maps using the shader map software. Then you can find a lot more variety of plants if you and other objects if you go to Quixel Megascans, but try not to use too many of them to keep the file size down. And I hope you got a lot out of this tutorial, and I hope you have a lot of fun with your project. And thank you for watching.